Okay. Hi, everybody. So we're all here for the So You Want to Be an Influencer panel. I'll get started. We have a bunch of wonderful panelists here who are all on Bookstagram, an online community on Instagram where we all just talk about books. And fun story, so I got onto Bookstagram top of the pandemic. I had 30 books checked out at the library because you can do that for some reason. And I just didn't really have anywhere to talk about the books that I was reading. And that's how I sort of got into Bookstagram. So I would love to know how you guys all found Bookstagram, how you found the community, what made you want to join, and if you were doing any type of like book content, like posting about books before you had joined at all. DJ.
Hi everyone, my name is DJ. So you can find me at Life in Fiction on Instagram and Twitter. So I kind of got started. My answer is going to be kind of weird because I work in publishing. So if I weren't doing this, I would still be talking about books in some capacity. But I started with Bookstagram like 2015 maybe, and that was kind of when Instagram was still kind of new. No one, there weren't all these kind of niche communities or specific communities on there, and I've always loved books. I was a book blogger for a while, so this was just kind of the natural kind of next step in terms of the platforms I was using. So that's kind of how I got started, and again, if I weren't doing this, I would still be talking about books in some capacity.
I'm Antonia. You can find me on Instagram at Black Girl That Reads. I got started with Bookstagram, I think, in 2017. So it was before people had like separate book accounts for different parts of their personalities and interests. And so I was posting a lot about books on my personal account, and my friends weren't huge readers at the time. And so back then you had to get like 10 or 11 likes for like the like count to stop showing names, and so I wasn't getting any engagement on my book posts, and so I had just tagged like the author, I think, and I clicked it and I found like lots of other people talking about the book at the time, and that's kind of how I discovered Bookstagram, and I created my account, and like my first post was just like a very awful filtered picture of like a book with a cup of coffee, but it's turned into so much more, and like I'm glad I discovered the community when I did. So
yeah, I remember those days where you had to get at least 11 likes for it to show. Hi, I'm Nena at SCS Reads, and I found Bookstagram. It was originally through BookTube, so I was making YouTube videos from like 2012 to 2014, I want to say, and that was a lot of work. And so I noticed that a lot of people had Instagram accounts where they talked about books, and I was like, I'm going to do that too. Create a totally separate Instagram account that's just books. So I started my Bookstagram account in 2015, and I've been doing it on and off ever since.
Hi, I don't know how far or near this needs to be. Hi, I'm Mariah. You can find me at The Need to Read, like kneading bread.
Like
yeah. And so I have a Bookstagram where I bake and I read, and I bake about what I read. And I started actually really relatively recently compared to this crew. I started in 2020 during the pandemic. I'm an English teacher, and I would scream into my classroom void about books. And I just had all this newfound time at home in my kitchen during the pandemic when I was teaching at home, and I just started the page. I didn't know about Bookstagram when I started it. I didn't know I was starting a Bookstagram. And then the Bookstagram community sort of found me, and I was like, yes, my people. So it was actually really exciting.
Okay,
Yeah.
You mentioned that you bake for your Bookstagram as well, and you mentioned that this is like a job. And when people hear influencer, they're kind of just like, oh my God, internet fame, like good for you. But it actually is kind of like a second job. So I would love to know, especially, you're baking, you're making things in relation to the books. How much planning and scheduling goes into the content that you're making, because it is, it is a job.
Yeah, I'm a type A personality, so I have schedules, color codes, post-its. I abide by that kind of law to rule my life. So I plan out my posts. I post much less because I'm baking. I post less than I'm reading. Only certain things make it onto the page. So it takes me about a week to plan, bake, execute a post.
Damn, 1 week for a post. That's crazy.
For me, it's like sometimes I'm really good about planning and I feel like I've gotten ahead and I know what I want to post. And then other times I'm like, I need to post something because I haven't posted in a few days. So it really depends on how much like other stuff I have going on in my life because, you know, I work a full-time job. So Bookstagram is like my side job or my side hustle.
I've tried to keep Bookstagram really fun, and I found that like the commitment to planning and knowing what I'm posting every single time ahead of time took a lot of the joy out of it for me personally. So I'm definitely a like kind of on the go type of poster. The most recent thing that you'll find on my page is exactly what I'm reading at the time, and I think it's because I view it as an archive of my personal reading as well, and so it's easy for me to go back and kind of like see where I was like at a certain point in my life and like what I was reading instead of kind of curating it around other things going on. There will be like planned content if there's like a huge event happening or I'm like really excited for a book, like I might share ahead of time that something's coming, but typically it's like on the go in the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that I'm the same. It's very much on the go. As much as I love a plan and love a schedule, I can't do that when it comes to my content. So a lot of it is a little bit more, you know, what I'm actually reading in the moment or that weekend. I would say the most that I plan in the sense that I will try to take a batch of photos almost every day. I can take up to like 50 photos and only get 5 good ones out of that. So, you know, I'll only have a handful of photos to use at any given moment anyway, so it's kind of all built around that. Now that Instagram has stories and all these other different features and capabilities that are a little bit more easier to use on the go, I definitely use those a little bit more, I think, these days, especially stories. Trying to get into Reels. I don't understand video content whatsoever. So when it comes to the actual posts, it's definitely a little more casual on my side of things.
Okay, for sure. I want to talk a bit about the pros and cons of having influence online. I think people sort of assume that it's just followers. There's no sort of cons or issues for you that come up on that side, or that there aren't any responsibilities also that you have as a bookstagrammer, because you do owe your audience a certain honesty about the books that you're reading, and how I feel like the power in publishing is often like with media houses and, you know, like big media companies. So like you guys as individuals like have this responsibility now to your audience. So what is that like, the pros and cons, and like what responsibilities do you have to your followers?
I'll start. Like as my account grew, I found that I needed to find a way to, I guess, be delicate with like how I share about someone's work. So like just as an individual reader reading for myself, I might like really not enjoy what I'm reading, and I might say that differently like outside of an online space where lots of people are looking on. As my account grew, I found that I had like more publishers following me, more authors following me. And with the way that Instagram works, like you can't really control what you're going to come across, and so I didn't want anyone to ever like be scrolling and see their book and like it was just something that like hurts their heart, right? Because I'm not an author, I don't have that goal right now, but I would never want to be scrolling and see that someone didn't enjoy my book, and like I'm engaging with them. So like I really do try to be like gentle with how I talk of books that I didn't completely enjoy and like completely fall in love in. I also find that I take a little longer now to share a book in my feed before, because you just don't know. Like if there's something that's at the end of the book that's extremely offensive, and then like now it's on my feed and I've recommended it, and people are going to pick that up and they're going to say like, oh, Antonia said this was a great book, and like there's something that I didn't know that was coming. And so I do try to be like very mindful of what I'm picking and what I'm sharing. A lot of times if I am sharing on the go and it's a title, it's because like I trust that author, or I know that like another author has blurbed it and I trust the things that they've put out into the world. And so just being mindful of when you share, what you share, and I guess how you're talking about books. Like you may not like every book, but there's something kind that you can say about what an author put into their work. So.
have like golden retriever syndrome when I read a book, where like I get really excited with whatever I read. So it's not very often that I like hate a book, because I just don't pick up books that like I know I'm not gonna vibe with. So like in that way, it's helpful. I don't think anybody comes to my like page for like critical, like they're like, "Where's the cupcake, Ryan?" So it doesn't really matter, anyways. But I am mindful of what I put out into the world, and like if I take a partnership, which is extremely rare, / I've never done it, I've just turned them down. I think about like my students who are following my page, and like how mindful I want to be as like what kind of authors I'm promoting and putting out there, making sure they're diverse, making sure there's a wide range, and making sure that I'm like pushing things that I personally like feel passionate about. So like I'm careful with that. Like I know that there's always this talk about like, well, if you get a book, are you being honest? Well, I just say no, because I don't want them, like unless I like really believe in the author and their message. Yeah.
I think for me, the responsibility is more just making sure that I'm creating a safe space and a welcome space, because so many of us have joined, all these different book social media platforms because we didn't have anywhere else to talk about books. We didn't really have anyone else to talk about them with. So, my goal and for me, my responsibility is just to make sure that the content that I'm putting out there is as positive as it can be. I don't often, talk about the books that I didn't love, because I also don't want to influence someone else's decision to not read that book when it could change their life for the better. And so who am I to dissuade them from that? Unless, of course, there's, extremely problematic content that is going to cause more harm than good, of course. And I will draw, some attention to that. But again, kind of like no one's coming to my page for those kind of like critical analyses, I guess. I read a lot of romance, so everyone just kind of wants to know the heat level of the books I'm reading and how spicy they are. But then also, because I work in publishing, I think I do have for me at least, a little bit of responsibility to be that liaison almost, and to share the information from the publisher side of things with other bookstagrammers and other influencers, but then also to take the feedback that I'm hearing from my fellow bookstagrammers and take that to my office, to my team, to the way that I work with them, and make sure that it's a positive relationship and collaboration across the board.
I think for me, echoing what Antonia said, like I really think that there are all sorts of people on Bookstagram, including other readers and authors, and I want to think really carefully about how I'm talking about a book. There may be things that I didn't like, and I want to try and identify what those things are, so that if someone feels similarly to me, they might understand, like, oh, okay, I can see why you wouldn't like that. Whereas for someone else, that might not be an issue. They might love that thing. So I want to kind of try and point out like what did and didn't work for me, and like I think really hard about like my reviews and what I'm saying, because I want to be, it's so subjective, but I want to be as fair as I can be. And then the other thing is too, I think a lot about like what books I'm showing on my page. I think for a while I was like doing hauls and things like that, but then I realized that I preferred to talk about books, more so books that I've actually read than books that I want to read, because a bookworm problem is like, I'll say I want to read a book, but who knows when I'll actually read that book. So I think I wanted to focus more on talking about books that I've read, so that I can speak to what the content of the book actually is. Not to say that I don't, show off a book I'm really excited about, but I wanted to make sure that balance was more on things that I've actually read and feel like I can discuss.
Okay, sorry, got distracted. So a couple of you mentioned sort of working with publishers, and DJ, it's really cool that you work in publishing. A lot of people think like a big perk is like getting ARCs, and they're like, well, how did you go about like getting ARCs? And like for me, I was just like really annoying on the internet until a publisher was like, yeah, you, sure, okay. And so I'd love to know how you guys started your working relationships with publishers, and how, as your accounts have grown, how that relationship has evolved or changed, or if there's anything that you sort of had to learn on the way of working with publishers as well.
I can start. So I'll kind of start more on the influencer side of things. I used to be a bookseller, and then when I moved to New York, I worked for a kind of bookish literary magazine. So a lot of the connection. I brought a lot of connections with me, so to speak. So getting the advanced reader copies was kind of easy for me. Not to oh, it was so easy, but so I already kind of knew who to reach out to. People already were familiar with me. So that's kind of how I got my way into getting those early copies. But a lot of it is just genuine enthusiasm too. I mean, there's still plenty of books that I don't know someone at that publisher, so I'll just email them. A lot of authors have their publicists or marketers email on their website, so it's pretty easy to grab that. But as someone who works with a lot of influencers, something that I really just love to see is the enthusiasm and the genuine interest, and it's really easy to tell in an email who is just looking to get the free copy and who's actually has a personal connection to the story or to the author, and that they're going to get a lot out of reading this book. And so really it can come down to just that kind of organic, genuine interest in a title. And also, anyone who works with me knows that I will just send you whatever you want. I do not care how many followers you have or what platform you're on. Sometimes people aren't even on platforms, because word of mouth is also just as important. So, again, I'm pretty liberal, and I always kind of over-order ARCs when it's, when I'm able to, and no one has told me to stop doing that, so fingers crossed. So, but if someone is looking to make those connections, it's just networking. It's just, showing your enthusiasm, introducing yourself, providing your stats, because those are still relevant. People do like to see the engagement that you're getting. I think these days it's less about follower count and more about the, how many comments are you getting, how many impressions are your posts reaching, and all that kind of stuff. So always provide that information, your address, your NetGalley email. I think NetGalley is a very underutilized website in a lot of ways. And NetGalley is a website where reviewers, booksellers, librarians, educators, media professionals can request digital ARCs. So it's free, anyone can sign up, and it's a really great way to kind of start making those connections, because once you start getting approved, downloading and reading and reviewing those titles, a lot of publishers will just start folding you into their email distros, and so you'll start popping up on the review blasts and all that kind of stuff.
I guess I'll go next. I got started because I was such a regular at my local indie bookstore back home that at one point I got pulled to the side and they were like, oh, we have a book that you might be interested in. And it was the very first advanced reader copy that I was ever given. It was American Marriage by Taraji.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yes,
to put
and I had no idea that these existed. And so, felt very blessed to have received one. And after I shared about it, I obviously tagged everything, and I found out that publishers were sending other advanced reader copies. And at the time, a lot of publishers were sending them through interaction through DMs. I wasn't so much aware of the distribution lists, and I guess just as my account grew, I the connections I made. I now receive seasonal ones, and so if there's a book that I'm really interested in, I'll reach out and ask for that. But I do try to be really mindful about the books that I do request now, because I want to continue to read what I want to read. Like you mentioned, it kind of becomes a side job or job in general, and it can really impact your reading. And so being mindful of what you do request, with the intent that you will at some point, and hopefully before Pub Day, read it so that you can generate a lot of engagement around it. So
Yeah, I got started, so I worked in publishing a long time ago. So I knew about ARCs, and I would get free books at work, which was my favorite perk of work. And then when I left publishing, I was on BookTube. So I knew that some BookTube friends were still receiving ARCs and things like that, and that kind of learning from them how to go about it from the other side. And then when I got on Bookstagram, similar thing. I feel like people who were sharing knowledge, people like DJ, I feel like you're so good at kind of sharing that publishing side of the knowledge and, not gatekeeping that information. That's how I learned that you could reach out to a marketer and request a specific title. And then as I grew, publishers started to reach out to me, and similarly got on distribution mailing lists. And I also tried to be very selective about what I request, because you know, we live in New York and the apartments are small. There's only so much room. But I feel really lucky to like have that relationship with publishers and have the opportunity to read books in advance and, you know, kind of get to like introduce a book to people potentially.
Yeah. When I got my first ARC accidentally. A friend brought it to Thanksgiving as like his potluck contribution, just a bunch of books. He works in publishing, and so I took one of the books and I like actually put it online, and I like didn't know what an ARC was. This is in 2020. This is so embarrassing. I didn't know what an ARC was, so I like didn't tag the publisher. I didn't tag anyone. I was like, oh my god, it says not for sale. Like I'm gonna get in trouble. So I had no idea what it was. Now I get ARCs, but like was said here, I only post like 5 books a month, if that. So I like try to be like really precious with what books I'm sharing because each takes a week to post, so I can't. I just don't have it in me. And I have like I think blown up some relationships by accident in the publishing world where they like sent me a book and like it was in the beginning and I was like, oh, this is fun, like books, and then they reached out to me. They're like, "Where's the book post?" And I'm like, I didn't know that was. I mean, I guess that should make sense that was part of this transactional exchange here. But yeah, no, I was like pregnant, and I was like, I'm not doing that. So then that relationship blew up, and now I'm like slowly reaching out to publishers that I really get along with, and now I go to them and I'm like, this is a book that I really care about, but that would happen like once every few months that I'll actually reach out. Yeah, so I'm just like a little bit more mindful about it. Now I know about it. There was a weird learning curve where I made some mistakes along the way.
What kind of mistakes?
Like I never posted that book. I just ghosted that person who's like, where's the book? And I was like, oh. I like just disappeared.
That happens a lot. I feel like you get the ARC and you're like, I have to post this, but sometimes like life just doesn't work out that way. So they get it. They'll be all right. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about another book platform, Book Talk, which some of us are on. Like we scroll, but we're Instagram purists in this house because we don't do the video content apparently. But Book Talk is also like blowing up. It's its own thing. I think like for Gen Z particularly, it's their sort of way of communicating the same love that we have on Bookstagram. It's just the same thing for them on Book Talk, but with the growing power that Book Talk has, what do you think is the specific value that Bookstagram and that specific platform and community brings that maybe can't be replicated like elsewhere?
I was just gonna say, from what I've seen, like dabbling a bit on Book Talk and being on Bookstagram for a while, like Book Talk is a lot quicker. Like everything moves so quickly. You don't as much get like in depth into things, whereas like Instagram is where I will post my longer reviews and like people actually read them sometimes, you know? So like, whereas I feel like because on TikTok, you really only have a few seconds to like capture people's emotions. Things move a lot faster. So I feel like for me, Bookstagram is where I want to go if I want to like discuss something in depth, and TikTok is more, you know, if I just want to have fun or like kind of like throw out a recommendation quickly, and then maybe we'll get into it in the comments. But that's just what I've seen so far, being on Bookstagram a lot longer, but being on TikTok for a few months.
Yeah, I love that, and I would agree. I'm not on Book Talk, but I work with a lot of Book Talk readers, and from what I can tell, I think, you know, the value in Bookstagram still is kind of I think a lot of us do, you know, photography kind of seriously, whether we're professionals at it or not. You know, it is something that we really enjoy. So obviously there's the difference in the format, right? And video is such a whole different beast, so to speak, and that takes a whole different set of skills. So I think, you know, the value is just, there's value to both platforms, and one is not better than the other, but I do think TikTok it is the quick kind of, here's a quick snapshot of information, or, you know, kind of more like the Spark Notes almost. And with Instagram, you know, we have the ability to have the longer captions to kind of tell a story in a longer kind of format. It is kind of like a micro blog, so to speak, I think, for a lot of us. And amazing thing about Book Talk, though, and the readers in that space is it's such a specific language that I can like identify and talk about, but it's not one that I can replicate. And so they're doing like an amazing thing over in that community, and we're seeing their enthusiasm translate to actual sales, which is really incredible. But it's a similar thing that we saw when book blogs were becoming a big thing, and then it was BookTube, and then it was Bookstagram. So like all these platforms have really done incredible work for promoting authors and getting those books into the hands of readers, and working in a nice kind of tandem with booksellers and librarians and educators and media professionals. So it's so wonderful to see another platform kind of come into the space, and I know there's a lot of kind of competition, so to speak, and I think there is a little bit of not animosity, but I think there is a little, nobody likes to feel like, oh, maybe we're being forgotten, but from speaking as someone in the publishing industry, we still value any platform that people are talking about books. Yes, Book Talk is kind of the platform of the moment, and it is powerful, but that doesn't mean the other platforms aren't as powerful. And I think those of us who are working in these spaces know that each platform has its own purpose, its own community, because I think there are people who cross-post across all of them, obviously, but I think, again, it is very specific to each platform. So, Book Talk is amazing. I cannot believe how they do all that, especially so quickly, because I cannot think that quickly. And I'm also worried about, like, the legality of the audio. I'm always like, I'm going to be that one person that gets flagged. So kudos to everyone on Book Talk, and I appreciate everything they're doing. And again, I think just each platform has its own value, and I think instead of trying to pit us against each other, because I think a lot of companies are kind of doing that and kind of showing favoritism in a way, I think it should all just be like we should be working together because we're all just here because we love talking about books.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I like used TikTok in the past because I would like create like little background, like behind the scenes, this is how I baked this thing, and I would just like edit it on, this is before Reels, like I would edit it on TikTok, and then I would just use that video like on Instagram, and I like never paid TikTok any mind. I definitely think TikTok is like really fun, like entertaining, in your face, but there's something that I really hold near and dear to my heart with Bookstagram, because it's sort of that blog format, and I just wasn't I haven't figured out, maybe I will eventually, but I haven't figured out how to translate my thoughts like verbally or with dance, which I'll never do. I won't subject you guys to that, but I'm not like all these like dance trends I just can't get. Maybe it's because I'm 30, but I'm with the Bookstagram community for now, but I do enjoy the community and how quickly I think it grows on Book Talk versus Bookstagram. I think that's the other thing I noticed, that Bookstagram was really like a slow burn, like it's finding your people pretty slowly, and Book Talk was like, I mean, like I had 100 followers, and then someone shared me, and then I had like 3,000, and I was like, what? And it hits you sort of like in the face a little bit harder. Yeah.
So I'm not on Book Talk at all, and I actually deleted TikTok because I was spending like hours a day just scrolling and like could not finish a book. But what I find most exciting about Book Talk from the ones that I've seen, and like obviously it doesn't apply to everyone because there's a wide range of readers on Book Talk, is that initially it seemed to kind of grasp that age group where you might lose your love of reading, so like early high school through young adult, like early 20s. A lot of like people's reading relationship becomes very fragile at that point because you start reading more in school. And so I did find that I even saw it with some of my younger cousins. They were picking up books again because they were encountering books that seemed interesting on Book Talk. And so I really do enjoy and appreciate the work that the people on Book Talk are doing in bringing books to people like in similar age groups and even a little beyond. So there's definitely value and room for what they're doing. So.
Did you all answer that? Yeah, okay. So for anyone that wanted to start a Bookstagram account, what advice would you have for them about getting started and growing their following on Bookstagram?
I think the number one thing that you've kind of heard throughout this is to keep, if you are starting a Bookstagram because you love books, which I'm assuming everyone here does, if you're starting a Bookstagram because you love books, make sure that that is your biggest leading force in your page. Like, try not to lose that, because it's easy to feel, once you like start it, it's easy to feel pressure, and I'm sure we've all felt that pressure at least at one point. So I would just periodically check in with yourself and remind yourself why, because I love reading. That's why I'm doing this. So I would just keep your kind of that as your priority going forward. Yeah.
It sounds so cliche, but like, of course, you just have to start. And I think leading with the fact that this is about like your reading, and sharing the books that you are passionate about and that you enjoy and that you want your friends to also read. When Bookstagram begins to feel like more of a job, that's kind of when like I turn inward, and maybe I'm not posting as much, but I'm like reading nonstop and trying to get back to why I started the account, and engaging more with others so that I can too find books. I think that's something that like we don't talk about a lot when we talk about Bookstagram, but I also use Bookstagram to find books that I'm interested in reading. And so like when I'm scrolling, like I'm going down and I'm pinning tabs, or I'm following hashtags and like kind of going down little rabbit holes. So yeah, remembering, like you said, your love of reading, and just like being gentle with yourself. Like, Instagram is Instagram. It'll be there. The books will be there. Read what you want. Find the fun and joy in it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. I think remembering why you started in the first place is so important, that you love books, because sometimes it will feel, at least for me, sometimes it has felt like, oh, I'm not enjoying this as much as I used to, and that's a time when I just take a break and I come back to it. Like, I've not posted every day on Instagram for the past 7 years or however long I've been on it, but like I have periods where I love it and I'm posting and talking about books and it's so great, and other periods where, like Antonia said, like I'm retreating back in, maybe I'm not sharing as much, and that's totally fine. And I think also the other thing is like posting about what you love to read about. You will find your people on Bookstagram. Like, you might think like, oh, it's kind of niche and people don't read that, but like you'll find them. They exist on Bookstagram, and I feel like Bookstagram is super welcoming. So like, don't be afraid to start, and like slowly you'll find your people and the people that you love to follow and you trust their recommendations. Like, you know, I have people I follow that if they read a book and like it, I know I'm gonna like it, and I love that feeling. So yeah, I would just say, you know, keep it fun, post about what you love, and don't be afraid to start, because we're nice.
I love everything you all have said about being authentic and remembering the reason why you wanted to join this platform. But I also think, you know, not only like why in terms of your love of reading, but, you know, what are you hoping to bring to this space for yourself or for others? And it's okay if it's really just for you. And I think there's always going to be someone who's like, well, this is how you should do it, or this is how you should talk about this book. So just remembering, you know, your own voice, and that your voice does matter and does have a place in this. And I think that will just go a long way in maintaining your enthusiasm for it. And you know, everyone has been saying when it starts to feel like a job, that's when you should take a break, and I definitely agree. You know, we hear so much about social media these days with the algorithm and you know, who's buying which platform and all that kind of stuff. So it can be very easy to forget that these platforms should be fun, and that we all, you know, signed up for these because we wanted to just have a fun space to make some new friends, to talk about the things that we're really nerdy about. So, you know, just kind of doing anything you can to protect yourself, so to speak. And again, whether it's remembering why you started this, or, you know, your love of reading. And I think also it's important to remember that just because you start talking about books doesn't mean you can't talk about other things too. You know, a lot of us, myself included, are always like, but the aesthetic and, you know, the vibe and everything. But it's always really important to give yourself the space to talk about your other interests. You know, I love talking about Charmed and Buffy and, you know, all the shows I'm watching, Ted Lasso, and I'm doing my Grey's Anatomy rewatch right now, and I'm in season 10, and I've been talking about that a lot on Twitter in particular. So I love being able to just kind of nerd out in general, and I think there's so much pressure on us to be like, oh, we have to talk about books all the time, and I think that plays into why it feels like a job a lot of times because we're only talking about that one thing. So it is nice, with baking or, any of your other, hobbies or interests or even your day job. I do talk about publishing a lot and I love doing that. So giving yourself the space to use your platform in the way that you want to use it is really important, especially, and, obviously you want to make sure that it's a positive and a safe space for everyone involved too. So, just kind of understanding the role social media has and your power in using it, I think is also really important to remember.
Can I just kind of add on? I also think like if you're just starting out and you like are intimidated, Book Talk is huge. Bookstagram is huge. Like it seems like kind of this like vast pit of like so many creators. Utilize the hashtags, utilize like the smaller communities, and you can find the thing that you're interested in and just start there. Like there are so many food and book accounts like mine, and I started there, and then that helped me really find my community and like find my voice a lot quicker than if I was just trying to do that, solo. So just if you're into like whatever you're into, you can probably find it. So find that subgroup and like build your community from there, and that will help you in your journey.
I love that. That's such a wholesome answer for everything. A question. So you guys have obviously been doing this for a long time now. So what has been your favorite piece of content that you've made thus far, and why was that one so valuable and special to you?
I know. Earlier this year, after actually moving to the city, I was able to do a partnership with Stony Clover Lane, An American Girl. I had actually, months before, started rereading the Addie books. I was absolutely obsessed with Addie and credit Addie for my love of historical fiction right now. And they actually re-released the dolls, and there was a collab between Stony Clover and American Girl that I got to be invited to, and it really aligned with my reread of the series. So that's probably the most exciting thing I've done with my account. So.
I think for me, I don't know. I'm so self-critical that I don't know, if anything I'm doing is good or a favorite. But I remember I made a reel. This was the one time my video content actually worked, I think. I made a reel of my Christmas morning walk. It was the first year of the pandemic, so what was that, 2020, 2021? What is time? And I just did this little, we were walking around the neighborhood. It was raining. And I chose a piano version of Last Christmas, which is one of my favorite holiday songs. And it was very sad and depressing sounding, which is perfect for my overall aesthetic. And I got so many comments from people being like, this was so lovely and very calming. Or I was feeling really, sad today, and this was a nice, moment of peace. And I think that was so rewarding on a personal level. And I felt, yay, my video content worked. But, that something that I created was able to make someone else feel good about their day was just really surprising and very rewarding. So I would say that was probably my favorite. And then the other thing was, I remember I did a book sleeve giveaway. If anyone uses book sleeves, I'm a huge fan of them. I think they're amazing. I keep trying to get work to let me make one, and they're like, that's too expensive. So I collaborated with someone who, a kind of Etsy independent creative who sewed her own book sleeves, and I partnered with her for a giveaway. And that was just really fun because it was the first time that I got to kind of collaborate with someone else in this bookish community like that. And it was for an Oreo design because I was giving away a hardcover of Simon versus the Homo sapiens, and that was just, I had so many people just, love that book, obviously, and to be able to share my love for that story and, kind of amplify a small business as well was just really fun. And again, it was just fun to collaborate with someone else in that space because a lot of what I do is very kind of solitary and isolated. It's just me doing all this kind of stuff. So that was one of the few times that I collaborated with someone else, and it was really fun.
I feel like for me, it was doing author interviews. I got to work with Anthropology last summer to do author interviews with 2 authors whose books I really enjoyed, and just getting that opportunity is something that I never thought I would get when I started my Bookstagram, or when I started talking about books on the internet many years ago. So I was just like, I don't know how you found me, but I'm so grateful, and I love doing it, and just getting to talk to authors about what inspired them and how they kind of made the story that I read and enjoyed was so awesome. Yeah, so that's my favorite thing that I've done so far, thanks to my Bookstagram.
So mine is like a twofold. So I think that my favorite posts are usually the ones that are like the most like authentically tied to the book. Like I read about a food in the book. They described it in detail in the book, and then I made it, and I think it's like probably what it tasted like, maybe, hopefully. It was all right in the book. So when I can like nail that, I get really excited because that's kind of the point, like why my page started. Those are not the posts that do the best. They get like 0% engagement because like everyone doesn't care about that. They're like, no, make me something that matches the cover. But those are the ones that I like really, really enjoy creating the most. But my favorite things on my Bookstagram have been not competitions, but the challenges that we do together. So I'll like ever so often, I'm not organized enough in that regard, but I'll like put out, okay, like this month I'm gonna be trying to bake macarons and match them to our book. Join me. And then people will join me, and like seeing everybody like trying to make like food, because I'm a self-taught baker. I spend all my time on YouTube just like looking up how to do things. So kind of like when the page can like let us fail and learn and be together in that way, I get really excited because then I learn how to bake something new, and then, you know, everybody's doing it with me, so it's really fun. Yeah.
Cool. I don't know if we have time. Are we? Okay, cool. So I'll ask like one more question and then get out. Okay. So since we all love an endless TBR, what is the most recent like Bookstagram made me do it book that you found and loved? Because Bookstagram has a lot of recommendations, and I find that I love so many of them. So
I like to read like really depressing books that make me cry, and that doesn't like translate well into cupcakes. So I think Bookstagram has like kind of exposed romance to me in a way that I've never seen before. So I started reading more romance. I just read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. I loved it. I recommended it to all my friends. I was like, you're gonna read it. It's steamy. I like it. And I never would have done that before. So I appreciate that new world of reading. Yeah.
I guess I'll go next. Yesterday, I finally ordered the book Love Radio online. I've been seeing it like absolutely nonstop. Everyone and their mom is posting it, and it's a Black YA romance, like YA teen romance. So I'm super, super excited for that one.
I'm such a mood reader, so I don't even remember what I've bought from Bookstagram in particular, but because I'm not on Book Talk, a lot of the like Book Talk recommendations I'll get through Bookstagram because eventually it all filters over. So I did finally pick up The Love Hypothesis. Someone had sent me an arc of that, and I just didn't get to it right away. But then when it kind of started blowing up on Book Talk and then Bookstagram, I finally was like, okay, I don't want to be that one person who hasn't read this. So I finally read it, and I loved that book so much. It was just really fun. But the beauty of Bookstagram is that, you know, I'm primarily a fantasy and romance reader, and I kind of just stick to those genres because I know what I like, and I buy a lot of books. I don't go to the library, so it's kind of like, well, I don't want to buy something that I know I'm not going to enjoy. But so I'm constantly buying books based on other people's recommendations in those kind of circles, and The Song of Achilles was kind of the in-between one, where it kind of was that one book that everyone's talking about, of course, and I ended up with 2 copies already, and I have not read either one of them yet, but they were so pretty that I just had to buy them. So a lot of my kind of the purchases or the reads that I pick up are more just like, I keep seeing the cover everywhere on these spaces, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty. May not read it, but it's gonna look nice. So Song of Achilles is definitely one, and I'm now reading the follow-up to Love Hypothesis because, again, everyone has been talking about it, and it's one that I was very excited to read. So Love on the Brain is my current one.
I was trying to think because I feel like Book Talk and Bookstagram influenced me so much. I'm like, what was the last one that I picked up? I think it was, for me, Why am I blanking on the title just now? I definitely picked up The Love Hypothesis because of Book Talk. I will say that Love Radio is amazing. I've read it. The last book I bought because of Bookstagram was, I think, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Finally read that one because everyone was talking about it. I was like, okay, I need to read that one. And then the one that Book Talk is making me feel like I must read now is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, I think. It's seems to be the book of the summer from what people are saying. So I'm probably gonna get that one next.
Okay, I think that's time. Okay, thank you guys for all of your questions, for all your thoughts. Thanks everybody for hanging out. That's it. Yeah.